KERR9000S Game Room.
Hi, it's KERR9000. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my games room. And I'm here today to do a review in my Super Nintendo games review series. So as you'll know from clicking on this link, the game I'm here to talk about today is Fire Emblem Thracia 776, which is a tactical role-playing game developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo for the Super Famicom, which I'm sure most people will know is the Japanese version of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It was originally released for the Nintendo Power Flash cartridge in 1999. So this is one of the things that makes the game interesting and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. So what was the Nintendo Power Flash cartridge, you're probably asking? Well, Nintendo Power was a video game distribution service for the Super Famicom and Game Boy systems that was operated by Nintendo exclusively in Japan from late 1996 until early 2007. The service allowed users to download Super Famicom or Game Boy titles onto a special flash memory cartridge for a lower price than that of a typical pre-written ROM cartridge. I guess you could consider it like an early form of digital game distribution, and something we didn't get over in Europe. The game did get a cartridge release the following year, but only in Japan. This game never made it to either European or American territories. At first, when I began reviewing Super Nintendo games for my 150 Super Nintendo game review project, I decided to only review games that I actually owned and to play them on original hardware only with no modification. But after I got over 150 reviews, I decided I'd like to expand the project beyond this point, and I'd look at a few other things such as ROM hacks, homebrew games, and as in this case, translated Japanese games. You see, one of the interesting things about the times that we live in now is that you can get easy access to all of these fantastic games which existed for the Japanese back then, but we didn't know anything about. I mean, remember, there was no internet back then. So unless it somehow made it onto an obscure page in a magazine, you know, you'd either not hear of it at all, or a few tiny pictures and a small blurb would be all you'd ever know. But now you can get these games yourself and try all these missing gems. So in these modern times, you can either use emulators to play titles like this, or buy counterfeit cartridges, or load the games onto a mini console, or as I've done here, add the ROM with the translation applied to it to an EverDrive type SD card reading device, which you plug in your console and play on a real SNES. This is actually one of the methods I'd recommend, as there are so many games like this to try that it would become highly cost prohibitive to buy counterfeit carts of all of them. I do, however, wish that Nintendo would contact one of the translators so they could offer this up for sale or make it part of the Nintendo Online Switch subscription service so that fans could actually try this game and others with Nintendo's blessing. So, for those who know Fire Emblem, where does this game sit? Well, it's the fifth instalment in the Fire Emblem series, being the third and final entry on the Super Famicom, and in fact the last home console Fire Emblem until 2005, when Fire Emblem Path of Radiance was released on the Nintendo GameCube, a review of which you can find elsewhere on my YouTube channel. Okay, so it's important to say that with this game not having an original English translation and me not having heard many people talk about it, I might actually pronounce all of the people, the kingdoms, and even the game's name itself wrong. But here we go, let's get into the story of it. Fire Emblem Thracia 776 takes place on the continent of Jugdral. If you're big into these games and have played the previous Super Famicom game, Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, it's set during the generational gap within that game. But don't worry, you don't need to have played any other Fire Emblem game for this one to make sense, as it has its own characters and story. This game follows a main protagonist called Leif as he assembles a private army in an attempt to defeat the ruling Grandvale Empire and restore his lost kingdom of Thracia. That's as much of the story as I'm going to give away, and I've limited my footage to stuff from the first mission or two because I feel that in the case of this game and Fire Emblem games in general, the story is one of the most important things about them. You play these games both to challenge yourself mentally to try and come up with the right tactics and battle plan to progress while not losing soldiers, but also to see where the story takes you. I'd say this game has a strong story, one which is both typically Fire Emblem but also very gripping. Just like pretty much all of these titles, you'll soon have your favourite characters who you form pretty deep attachments to, and you'll be desperate to guide them to victory and keep them safe. So the gameplay follows the traditional Fire Emblem system of tactical battles taking place on grid-based maps, but it does have certain added elements such as a fatigue system where characters lose energy with each action performed. You'll work your way through the various story-based missions which come with varying objectives, from defeating specific enemies to rescuing targets to simply safely escaping from overwhelming odds. Each of the maps holds a variety of different terrains, from flat grasslands to bushes to mountains, which you have to consider when either traversing the land or attacking enemies. In addition, a fog of war effect is present in some maps. When you see this, the map's obscured until you get a unit to advance and reveal the portion of map within their movement and attack range. There are also locations such as towns and churches where items, money or health may be found. The game, like all Fire Emblems, works in a chess-like manner where you take a turn followed by the computer taking its turn. But unlike chess where you pick and move one piece per turn, in these games you get to move every single one of your characters before the computer then takes its turn and does the same. The real key to the game is trying to keep a few moves ahead within your mind. Don't just think about what you're doing now, but think about what the computer may do next and about how you can keep ahead of the game. Do you advance out into the open in range of multiple enemies, or do you stick back in the semi-safety of the bushes and wait for the enemy to advance on you? Well, that decision's for you to make. As you defeat enemies, you gain experience which sees your soldiers level up and become even stronger. Part of the strategy in this game is to make sure you use the right type of unit for the right situation. Swords, for example, beat axes, but axes beat lancers, while lancers beat swords. It sounds complicated, but it all soon becomes second nature. You also need to be mindful to not overuse your tougher characters, or you'll rob some of your initially weaker soldiers of the chance to grow in power, and some of them have the possibility to end up much stronger than your original strong characters. After a certain point in the game, advanced planning for units becomes available, which means that instead of having you take your whole army into battle, you're tasked with picking the best group of units to take onto each stage. Okay, so overall, what do I make of the game? Well, if I judge the game as something of its time, then the sound and graphics are good for their day. But the graphics are a little bit basic compared to more current Fire Emblem titles. I still think it's worth playing, but it's just something to keep in mind depending on your tolerance to old-fashioned graphics. I think it's a good game and I enjoyed it a lot, but the steep difficulty curve when compared to other Fire Emblem entries makes me say that it's a good game to play if you're into your Fire Emblem type games and you've played a lot of them, and I would give the game a score of 8 out of 10. But I have to note that if you're thinking of jumping into the world of tactical RPGs, then this might not be the perfect entry point. If you're looking for a good first time as Fire Emblem, I'd probably recommend you try either Path of Radiance on the GameCube or Fire Emblem the Blazing Blade, which was just called Fire Emblem in the UK, which can be found on the Game Boy Advance, as I think both of these titles offer an easier introduction to this style of gameplay. But overall, I really enjoyed this game and I'd heartily recommend it. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. There's plenty more SNES reviews on my channel, as well as other video game based things, horror movie reviews, all kinds of geeky stuff. So why not check some of them out? Or why not comment below? Or, you know, on one of my other videos that interests you. But most importantly, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care of yourself and each other. Laters, taters. Hi, it's KERR9000. I'd just like to say thank you for making it to the end of my video. I've got lots of stuff on my channel, my horror house doing horror reviews, my game room where I talk about video games, Sci-Fi Station, my Diet Corner videos, all kinds of stuff. I can also be found on the Retro Gamer U forum and the J Arcade forum, which are both great places full of great people and some great video game conversations. At the end of this video there'll be a little icon to tick if you want to subscribe, a link to a video and a link to one of my playlists. I'd also like to recommend the wonderful talented Just Jessica 1988 on TikTok, who does a lot of diet videos and is my supportive partner. Thank you once again for watching my video, and particularly if you follow me, thank you for all of your support. Have a great rest of your day. Laters, taters.